and watching this video courtesy of GooglePlus.com. We're glad you're here this afternoon. I'm Michaela Hunt, formerly of NBC4 in Columbus, Ohio, and I am sitting down with life and business strategist Keith Speers this afternoon. Keith, hi.
Hello, hello, hello. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. Keith is a friend of mine, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself in just a second. I, for one, as Keith knows, and we've talked about plenty recently, left the news business recently to kind of strike out on my own and start something new, to start kind of telling innovative stories coming out of our community, as well as just stories that are making a difference in the world around us, plus inspiring people a little. So that's what MichaelaHunt.com is really all about. That's what I'm all about. And today we're going to talk with Keith a little bit about executive presence. And if you don't know what it is, it's okay. Keith is going to give us a lesson in it and really why it's important to have it. And so Keith, so first of all, before you go anywhere else, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what you do in your business and career.
Sure. I'm Keith Speers. I'm the CEO, a life and business strategist of Consulting Without Limits. This is like my third career, I think. So I've built businesses before and let other people take them and run with them, sold them off. This is, I refer to it as I'm not building a business now. I'm just building a job that fits with my life. So what I do is I work with two ends of a continuum. On one end, I work with large corporations, like Nationwide. And on the other end, I work with small business owners and entrepreneurs, helping them to think about scaling their business, growing their business, strengthening their business. Sometimes they've got a business, but they just need to make it stronger. I help them to navigate all the things that they don't know. And so that's the great part.
Do you feel like that you've seen more and more people kind of striking out on their own, that entrepreneurial spirit in the time that you've had this particular business?
Sure. I mean, I've always been connected to that community because from the time I was little, I was charging my siblings interest on loans. So I've always been the person that was kind of thinking about how to make money. So I think I'm more naturally just drawn to people who have that entrepreneurial spirit. So I think that community's always been there. Now we're seeing more and more of it take shape, especially with millennials who really are not afraid to kind of step out there and say, I want to do something different. And I have something to say, I think I can do it, and I think it'll make a difference.
Yeah, we have a lot of that group here in Columbus, you know, as you know, kind of building that crowd, that population even here in town. But then there's those like me who are kind of, you know, kind of stuck in the middle, and those a little bit older than me that are still in their careers kind of trying to figure out things. So we're going to talk a little bit today, as I kind of mentioned, about executive presence. I brought, we're supposed to bring mugs, Keith, because, you know, we're going to have, I mean, I'm thinking this is going to be about half an hour. So you brought yours. I got to show you mine because you're not going to be shocked that I have this mug.
Love and honor.
I was going to say, this is in honor of Keith. Keith, was it your graduate? You went there for graduate school to Miami, right?
I did.
There you go. There's going to be a large lipstick mark, as usually as with my coffee mugs on that as I sit that down. But that is for you today. I
brought my Northwestern mug. So let me just say the reason why I brought it, first of all, it's more like a soup bowl.
Yeah, it is.
I am the lover of coffee, so I don't like to have to go back and like refill and refill and refill. And I drink it fast enough that it doesn't get cold. But I've had this mug. This was like one of my, I think it was like my second professional job ever. And I have had it for so long. It used to, on this side in gold, say Northwestern University, and now it says nothing.
No, I thought it was like a simple black mug. I mean, you've washed it not many times.
Because it is well used.
Well, I know you love coffee. I'm a lover of coffee. Caffeine is what it takes kind of to get through the workday. So good story about the mug. I enjoy that. I have a collection of them. So this one is specifically on my end for you today, like I said.
Thanks so much.
Well, we're going to talk about executive presence. And first of all, you know, kind of this concept that you were sharing with me. And for those of you at home who are interested kind of in really, you know, taking your career to the next level, this sounds like a conversation you definitely want to listen to and find out more about. So Keith, you know, exactly, first of all, I guess, for us, tell us what executive presence exactly is.
Well, there's the tricky part, right? Because executive presence is really defined by the executives in the company. And so Obviously, we could say a lot about how that's shifting and changing and morphing over time, right? But what we all think of as executive presence is really that notion of being able to speak well, being able to command a room, having confidence, being able to decide how much to speak and when you need to be more concise. So it's all of those things that go into someone saying that you could be an executive in their company and represent them well.
So charisma, yes. I mean, being able, when you're talking about being able to kind of come into a room, and I love what you're saying about how much to say and what not to say, because I would think that would be critical in some of these situations, in most of these situations, when you're dealing with kind of the higher ups in a company.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first part of your question?
I was saying, I think that charisma, I was saying, is I think kind of what you're talking about when you're walking into a room. And I think it would be critical to also know what to say and what not to say when you're dealing with the higher ups in your company. So some of us, that doesn't come naturally. Some of us are less concise than others. So how exactly do we build that? How exactly do we work on that and make that part of who we are if it doesn't come naturally?
Well, a couple of tips for you. First of all, always look at the people who are higher than you on the organizational chart, because their behavior got them there. And so it's a good indication of the behavior that they expect to see for others who would join them there. So I think that let's talk about a little bit about how styles play into that. Mm-hmm. For someone who is quieter versus someone who can really think on their feet and express an opinion pretty quickly, introverts versus extroverts. An introvert has to think about ways in which to get their voice heard, even though an extrovert is probably the first and last person to talk in the room. And so things that an introvert can do, they can think about, how is it that I can kind of take control of that before we get there? Make sure that they step up to the plate, they take initiative. So if there's going to be a conversation, go and research or think about the topic that's on the agenda. So that by the time they get to the room, they're prepared to speak. They formulated some ideas and they're ready, rather than waiting for the conversation to happen the first time when they're in the room.
And what about for the extrovert? If you say too much sometimes.
Yeah, right. So the people like me, right? It's about knowing when to stop and listen. Listen. So one of the things that executives want to know is that you're capable of hearing an idea and building off of it. And so for an extrovert, that probably means hearing something, stopping, listening, and even in your head, repeating it back. Because often we're formulating the next idea while someone is talking. And that comes across as though we're not paying attention, that we don't care what's being said in the room, that the only ideas that matter are ours. And that doesn't come off as executive presence.
And I think about it kind of as my life as a reporter. It's funny that you say that, because so many times we're kind of thinking ahead to the next question. I mean, even kind of as we have our notes right here and we're talking right now, but you really do have to think about the responses and how someone is addressing the question you just asked. So yeah, I mean, I'm listening to you right now, and we were literally talking kind of in our emails back and forth before we did this interview about balancing our authentic selves with this. And that goes right back to the question that we talked about. So I'm a work in progress. I just need to kind of, if I'm an introvert, I need to kind of in my head know that moment when I can step up in a meeting. But like in a day-to-day situation, how do I balance who I am with kind of just my presence inside the office? So I'm exuding executive presence just when I'm doing my regular job.
Sure. And I think that when we think about executive presence, we have to recognize that there might be some variance in the people that hold that title currently. And so when we talk to someone who is more verbal, right, then we need to try to match that style. And so it's about flexing who we are. It's not inauthentic, but it's about understanding, I believe the phrase is probably understanding the assumptions that make you powerless. And so one of those assumptions is, if I just do what I'm comfortable with, that might not be well received by everyone who's not like me. And so it's about understanding who you're speaking to and trying to flex your style to their style.
That seems hard. That seems like it could be hard, and that you would have to be really strategic about it. Is it difficult to do this? I mean, how do you get yourself kind of in that mindset over time?
Well, there's a reason why we call it work. So it is hard, but I think the thing that's really important is when you start to pay attention to who someone else is, how they operate, how they speak, the degree to how they problem solve, how they communicate, how they make decisions or communicate decisions, or how much data they need in order to make a movement or make a decision. When you start to pay attention to those things, the reason it comes up as executive presence is because it's informed. And I think that's rather than thinking of it as, I'm not being authentic, think about it as collecting information that helps you respond to people in a way that helps them to receive the information.
That's a good way to consider it. If you're not comfortable kind of in that interaction and putting yourself out there a little bit in that space that you're talking about. Has this culturally, I mean, you and I have seen a gamut, obviously, we've run the gamut, I should say, of what we've seen inside the workplace and our parents and their parents. How has executive presence really changed over time, especially in this moment that we're in right now compared to 10 years ago?
Well, certainly businesses and organizations are changing. So executive presence has to keep up with that. But probably the biggest change that we're seeing is that we no longer have just the good old boys club, the white older men who are forming the executive team, which might have meant that executive presence looked like that. So now we have more women, we have more people of color who are holding those roles. And so that changes what executive presence looks like. So if to be stereotypical for just a moment, if older white men, not much unlike myself, had a certain way of thinking about what that should look like. And it might have looked like years ago, it might have looked like suit and tie. It might have looked like monogram cuffs on the sleeves.
Oh yeah.
It might have looked like I speak, you listen. That's now not so much the way of business, that we have people that are bringing different leadership styles, some that are much more collaborative in nature. And so they want to generate ideas and brainstorm, and they want to hear diverse perspectives before making a decision. And so now it's more about being able to communicate, and it's much more about being able to think, articulate, and build up of other ideas.
So let's talk a little bit more about kind of that articulating, thinking, communicating in this moment that we're in time right now, this place, 2015. Having focus and staying in the moment is always going to be important, obviously in the jobs that we do, but there are so many distractions, that we have at work. And when we're developing this kind of executive presence, trying to develop it with all these people around us and these wants and these demands, how do we really stay focused on the moment while still being that person inside the office that is developing, some of these characteristics?
Yeah, I think that if you find that and you can bottle it, you've got the $1 million.
I know, right? Okay, you can tell me how you want it presented, and I'll write it up for you, and then we will do very well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the $1 million question. Much of what we see in larger corporations is this notion of moving to kind of cubicles, and not many people have 4 walls around them, right? So that has benefits to a certain type of worker, and not so much to other types of workers, right? As someone who, my entire life, I've struggled with maintaining my attention on things. I'm the shiny object kind of person. Oh, look, that doesn't really support me in being very successful. So things like in those environments, you see people utilizing headphones in order to limit distractions, right? Being able to focus in that way. Or you see people reserving conference spaces for really important conversations where they know that they need to focus more. And I think it's a combination of strategies. Like usually those people who are at the highest end of the organization do have the walls. So agreeing to go to their space and meet them where they are, so that some of those distractions are limited. Those are some of the strategies people are using.
You mentioned kind of the change that we've seen in, just leadership and management over the course of the last 10 or 20 years who is in that, top office with executive presence. Given the fact that we have seen this diversity, does executive presence look different for men than for women when you're talking about all the things that kind of go into it?
I mean, obviously, and I don't want to be too stereotypical here, but there's a reason why we describe often describe women's ways of leading differently. By and far, if you look at the research, women tend to be much more collaborative in nature. And I don't want to paint this picture of women are not confident and can't make their own decisions. They like to be more informed and have more perspectives before making those decisions. I think that what we're seeing now is we're seeing some women like Sheryl Sandberg and others who are being willing to talk more about their style and about how they think about the workplace. It certainly changes the workplace when we talk about the notion of working virtually. Mm-hmm. And so, for companies that offer that, trying to demonstrate executive presence over virtual means becomes even another challenge, right?
Right.
I mean, even as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm thinking, oh, I should be looking at the camera, right? And I find myself looking at your face, which I know is below the camera, but I'm like, oh, I should be looking up there.
Right.
So there are all these challenges that go into it that make executive presence in 2015 a lot more complex than it was in 1990, when everybody was face-to-face and everybody was local and everybody was in a bricks and mortar building.
If it makes you feel any better, I'm looking at your face too. I am not looking at the camera. And I'm the one who's been doing this part of it for, almost 17 years. So don't feel too bad. So, okay, and I think Sandberg's a great example because, so she does lean in, right? And it's a book about women kind of leaning in, pressing into what they're going to do. But then on top of that, I think about everything that's gone on. It was the tragic death of her husband and kind of how she addressed that in a very authentic way, talking about in terms of her career and her professional life, how that was affecting her. So as this executive, she has been able to show this real side of herself while also maintaining, these are the things that are important to me. I need to take some time away for this right now. So great example.
Yeah, and so it's a message about what the executive looks like. And I think that that's the thing to take away from this. I'm not so sure it's women or male and female gender kind of differences, but it's certainly that the executive today can look like lots of different things. And so figuring out executive presence is really based upon figuring out who holds that role and then trying to understand what's important to those people and being able to demonstrate it yourself.
Now, if you had to say there was a combination of things, so you said, charisma, obviously the ability to command a room, what other things kind of add into it? I mean, obviously we're talking personality right there, but is how I dress, is how I deal with, what I'm doing at my desk, those details on an everyday basis. I mean, how does that look? What do I need to be concerned about in life?
Well, I definitely think that there are some competencies that when you master them, they lend themselves to demonstrating executive presence. And so composure would be one of them. Being able to hear something that's difficult that might throw some other people off, that might cause some to react emotionally, but being able to hear it and immediately think, so what does that mean internally? And then be able to express, here's an action plan, or here are the next steps. So that notion of composure is certainly something that people are looking for at that next level when they're talking about executive presence. Some of the competencies that exist, decision-making, for sure. People want to know that they're hiring problem solvers at that top level. They want to know that they have people who are representing the company. And so knowing your company and its values, its mission, its strategic plan, and what goals they're trying to accomplish, and always considering that as you think about making that next decision. How does this help us get closer to those things? Those are all great strategies for making sure that people see you in a way that would make them consider that you have executive presence.
you know, some of those things that you're saying when you're talking about, you know, decision making and composure and some of those other things, if you're applying for a job, whether it be within the company or with another company, and you're kind of putting yourself up for that, when you're interviewing for it, are those really core things? I would imagine they are, to be able to verbalize in that interview, you know, some of the things that we're talking about with executive presence in your current job.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to my clients who are executives at some of these very large companies, one of the things that they tell me is to be considered for the executive level, you had to have demonstrated through your career success, right? So you had to demonstrate in your current job or your previous jobs that you were competent and capable and you could do that work. But when you get to the executive level, they do something called, that I'm going to refer to just generally as shopping the candidate around. And so they might have decided you're a good candidate, but then they shop you around to other people who they perceive to be their peers and at that executive level to see if anyone has any issue with this person before they're selected into the position. That's happening more and more frequently. So I think that what it says is it's really about people's perception of you as an executive. And sometimes that plays in lots of ways, because we know in large corporations, we tend to see things like on the people on their way up the ladder might pass someone who was their previous supervisor. And so this notion of this happens in large corporations. So all of a sudden, the person that you were supervising that maybe you weren't so kind to is the person who others are saying, hey, I'm shopping this person around. I think I want to offer them this position. And they're saying, oh, I used to report to them and here's one of the concerns I have. And so just this notion of recognizing that those decisions might appear to be solo in nature, but a lot more people are weighing in on whether they think you belong at that executive level.
I've had friends that has happened to in the job process, having anywhere between 5 to 15 different interviews within an interview, you know what I mean? Spending a day inside an office. And so that sounds like that's what that is, shopping around.
Absolutely. And I see it where it happens both positively and negatively, right? Someone says, I think that this is the person, and in shopping them around, others say, absolutely, right? So being able to build relationships and every opportunity that you're given, making sure that you excel and demonstrate that you go above and beyond, builds you that reputation, right? So when you're shopped around, it helps advance you. And at the same time, I've seen it happen the other way, where people start to say, I'm not sure that that's your best candidate, and here's why. And they start to list the way that you make a business case for a decision, or the negotiations they've seen you be a part of, right? So some of those critical skills at the executive level, and the next thing you know, you're no longer in the running.
So that makes me nervous, and I want to ask you a little bit more about that, because when you're being kind of shopped around in those situations, when you are interviewing for a job or looking for that promotion, how many people in that kind of shop around moment really, how many vocal people does it take to maybe be of concern for you? I think that would make some people nervous as they're kind of going through the process. How many people does it take to give the no and for you not to be considered anymore?
Well, I'm not sure that there's a magic number, but what I would say is it's all about the person and their position. So the higher you are, the fewer there are. So we know that when it comes to executives, it's a pyramid, right? It goes like this. And so at the top is the CEO. And so those executives are the small section right here at the top. And so there aren't that many of them, and therefore it's probably not going to take many concerns to suggest that maybe there's another person who could do the job better.
Many concerns of theirs at the top.
Yeah. I mean, if there are only, let's say that there are 10 people that hold that position company-wide. If 2 of them are expressing a concern, you're already at 20%.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know, I think the other really important thing to think about is, as you think about that, like how, you know, we're talking about a lot of the problems, here's a strategy. And so as you're thinking about that next level, it's always great to see if you can identify some people who are at that level as mentors, who can guide you, who can give you feedback, who can say, hey, here's something I think you need to work on. Because then when your name comes up, they can say, hey, I've been working with that person, and here's the change I've seen, right? So it can help you overcome some of those things that maybe you did earlier in your career that you say, wow, if I know now, if I knew then what I know now, I might have done that differently. So having those mentors that are there that kind of stick up for you becomes a great strategy in helping to, when you're shopped around.
Are you in my head? Because I think you're in my head, because I was about
I
to.
don't mind if I am.
Well, hey, I don't mind if you are either, given some of the knowledge that you have, because this is so good for so many of us in a variety, obviously, of different careers. I mean, we're talking everybody can take advantage of this if you're working and wanting to kind of, be promoted or move to the next thing. So you were talking about this feedback and about mentors, and that's where I was going in my head. And a note that I had taken down about how we get honest feedback about how we're developing our leadership style at work. So you talked mentor, we've gone through that. How do we get honest feedback from our boss? Maybe our boss is not our mentor, but how do we get honest feedback from our boss about how we're developing that executive presence, that our leadership style?
Well, let's hope that the companies that we're talking about that are looking at executive presence have some performance review processes in place. Let's start there, right?
Okay.
So in that, it's always a great idea to specifically ask the question from your boss. Well, first of all, to articulate, here's what I see as my plan, where I'm going, here's the roadmap that I'm thinking of. What do you think of that? Do you think that it aligns and gets me to where I want to go? First question, right? Does my plan make sense? Because theoretically, that person's been there and would know whether that's a good plan or whether you're missing something.
Mm-hmm.
Second question, what would you tell me I should work on that would help me execute this plan? And I say that because I think it's difficult to give feedback that's not always kind or not always positive. And so I think that a lot of supervisors, even though they're in that role, still kind of shy away from doing that, which doesn't help the employee, right? They leave that position, going to another one, and no one ever told them that they needed to work on, it might be something as simple as when you speak, you have some noun, subject, verb agreement kind of thing going on there that doesn't make you sound intelligent, right? You're really intelligent, but you need to take a course or something to make sure that you really think about, did I use the word was or were appropriately, right? You do it frequently. And so giving you that feedback only helps you. If I don't tell you, then you continue to make that mistake and you continue to look not so intelligent. And it's things like that that will keep you out of the executive washroom, right? So just being willing to say, look, I know that this might not be your favorite kind of feedback to give me, but I welcome you telling me anything that I could improve, anything, the smallest thing that I could do to improve my chances of being able to follow this career path that I put in front of you and you say is a good one.
And for those of you watching, if you just want to put Keith on record and then play it for your boss, that works too.
Well, I think that if you give someone permission or they're seeking feedback, it sometimes makes it a little easier. I think that that's not always going to be a win. I would also ask your colleagues, ask your mentors, what do you think I could do? What would keep me from, if you thought about executives in our company, how do I compare? Do I have similar skills, or develop that list of skills that you're trying to develop yourself, right? Identify what they are and ask your colleagues, how do you think I'm doing in these areas? So soliciting the feedback sometimes will give you more than perhaps maybe that ongoing review process. It's unfortunate that sometimes people just get that final, you meet expectations or you don't meet expectations, and not a lot of the data that goes along with it. Here's what you could do to meet expectations.
If I'm not working for a boss that is giving me feedback, should I be concerned about that? And should that be cause for me maybe to kind of start to look for that next job?
Well, you should, first of all, definitely tell me about that boss, because I should be working with them on how to give feedback and how to supervise. Supervision, there are three main parts to it, right? Setting expectations, providing support, and holding people accountable. And the accountability piece is that feedback loop. It's helping you to understand how close you're coming to the target and what you can do to hit the target. So if they're not giving you that feedback, should you be concerned? Yes, because it's only a moment in time away from them saying you didn't hit the target, and you're sitting there saying, what happened? Right? So yes, be concerned and say, I need to have something to work on. I need to have a continuous improvement plan. If your boss isn't giving you one, then identify, say, I want to do this for my own professional development, press them, perhaps put something in front of them, ask what they would say in response to that. You know, it'll do you a load of good if you're willing to take on the work yourself, although it's totally your supervisor's responsibility. Let me be clear. It'll do you a load of good if you take that on yourself and you can get them to finally open up and give you a couple of things to work on.
So here's the good news about this Google Hangout. We have been recording it. Obviously, you're watching it most likely on michaelahunt.com. And if you weren't taking notes, you can go back to the beginning and start to take notes, right?
Absolutely.
Keith, it has been excellent talking with you as always. And I just thank you because I think that so many people need to hear some of these things but don't have the opportunity to do it, you know, to be able to sit down with someone like you. Keith, it takes clients, and what I've done, and Keith, I don't know if you can see it on your end, I'm showcasing your website to the side over here. You might not be able to see it, but website for Consulting Without Limits. So you can check him out, his business, what he does in Central Ohio and also around the country. It's keithspeers.com, but like I said, I believe the right of what you're looking at right now, and we'll make sure we get a link up on the website. So I thank you so much for, you know, just being here and talking for about 1.5 hours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Well, thanks for being a cheerleader, because you definitely have been. So hopefully we will be able to talk like this again, maybe do some other subjects. That's what we're hoping to do here on michaelahunt.com. So again, thank you for joining us for this chat about executive presence today on michaelahunt.com. Check back in on the blog for more great information coming up here. With, you know, each day moves along and I'm putting something different up, so make sure that you're checking back in on a regular basis. Until we talk again and continue the conversation. Bye, Keith.
Bye.